Solutions webinar, How to Make the Franchise Decision. We would like to thank Blimpie, our sponsor. Blimpie is the oldest continually operating sub-sandwich franchise and has nearly 900 non-cooking restaurants. This is a really great option to help you fulfill your lifestyle and financial goals. My name is Sharon Dietrich. I will be moderating the webinar today. Since there are so many of you on the webinar, you will be muted. If you want to ask a question, it's pretty easy. Just type your question in on the right-hand side of your screen, and I will save all the questions until the end. Unfortunately, Michael's side woke up this morning with no voice. Pretty hard to have a webinar without a voice. Kim Ellis, a senior consultant with Michael's company, graciously agreed early this morning to fill in. I've happened to know Kim for a long time. She is a senior consultant, as I mentioned, at Michael's Side and Associates, and her area of focus there includes assessing and developing franchise sales and marketing programs. But an interesting tidbit about Kim, she grew up in a family that operated a Schwinn bicycle franchise, so she can identify the challenges and rewards associated with franchising and small businesses. She's also worked with Great Clips, Premier Salons, and Regis Brands, holding leadership positions in franchise development. Kim also, in the year 2000, helped launch FranChoice, and this is an amazing statistic. By 2003, FranChoice was placing an estimated 10% of all new franchisees in the United States. So I want all of us to know that Kim really, truly understands the process of buying a franchise on so many different levels. She has also been the president of Bison Advertising and VP of Corporate Development at Process Peak. I have heard Kim quite often. She's a frequent speaker at industry events and has been cited as an expert on franchising in a variety of publications, including Wall Street Journal, USA Today, Franchise Time, and Franchising World. Kim, I look forward to you sharing your wisdom with us.
Thanks, Sharon. I am happy to be here. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, I want to welcome everybody. I apologize that you're getting me instead of Michael. Michael is a significant expert in the industry, and he is an amazing speaker. I will try my best to fill his shoes, but based on the conversation I had with him this morning, you're probably going to be glad that you're not trying to hear what he has to say because his voice is so bad. So I sent him back to bed and told him to drink some tea, and hopefully he'll be feeling better tomorrow. I am thrilled to be here, actually. I do know this topic quite well. FranChoice is a company that helps people like you make the decision on what type of franchise to go into. We certainly placed a number of people successfully and helped them identify the types of businesses they wanted to go into. And the reason that we launched that company was because we saw so many people making basically poor decisions, and that leads to not only a frustrated and financially compromised franchisee, but it also weakens the franchise brand itself. So what we're going to do today is hopefully be able to provide you with some tools and guidance to be able to help you in making a solid decision on what kind of franchise you should get and what the process is that we recommend you should go through. If you want to advance, this is Format Franchise is basically offering you three things. When you buy a franchise, you're not really buying an actual unit, and I want to be really clear on this. Franchising is a format of expansion, and it allows the franchisor or the company that you're buying from to expand their business, but they own their brand and they own the trademark. You are only buying the right to operate a business under that trademark. You are not actually buying the business. And I think that that is a really important distinction in franchising. And if that piece is not a comfortable place for you, you need to probably reevaluate whether franchising is the right investment for you. They are, I think that one of the keys to buying into a franchise, though, is many people have some risk adversity, and we'll talk a little bit about that later, but in addition to the brand, you're also buying a proven system. So if there is some level of risk that you fear that keeps you from opening your own business, franchising is probably a pretty good route for you to look at. And obviously one of the other distinctions of a franchise versus, say, a business opportunity, you are going to enter into a long-term relationship with the franchisor, and that includes getting ongoing support, training, marketing. It's a very intense relationship that they will be providing to you in exchange for an ongoing fee, which they call royalties. What you're going to be bringing is your management skills, your capital, and your desire. Those are three things that, if you think about it from a franchisor standpoint, instead of having somebody that is a manager level that is working their way through college and they have taken a job as a manager in their chain store, a retail location, and they're running the retail location, they're probably not going to have the same level of enthusiasm or commitment that somebody that has their own skin in the game would have. So it really does become a very good platform for expansion when a franchisor selects franchisees that have similar management skills, the capital to grow the system, and they have the desire and the commitment to really make that unit or that location profitable and successful. So when we talk about how to find a franchise, we want to make sure that we're finding one that's right for you. And to do that, go ahead, Sharon.
Oh, sorry.
Typically, most people are going to look at a franchise, and they'll buy a franchise based on something they see in an ad. You know, maybe it's a print ad, or you're sitting on the airplane and you see an ad in one of the Sky Mile magazine type of thing. Typically, and this is kind of what I hear from a lot of people, they'll actually select a franchise based on where they like to eat. I know somebody that actually bought into the Subway franchises based on the fact that they used to like to eat there, and their thought process was, well, everybody's got to eat. This is a pretty good sandwich. We should probably buy into this. It's a good program, because you see one on every corner, right? Well, unfortunately, it wasn't a good fit for that person, and they ended up filing bankruptcy. They had actually at that time 5 locations, and it just was not a good fit for that person. When I talked to him later, he realized some of the mistakes he made, including not really being committed to a retail hour location, meaning he doesn't want to be open 7 days a week. He wants to have more flexibility in his life. So that's an example of kind of what we're going to talk about. The last piece is just, you know, you talk yourself into it. We've all been there. Going through life, you tend to talk yourself into certain things. I know that I think I talk myself into going on a diet every January, and you know, sometimes it's successful and sometimes it's not. So we're going to talk about a better strategy. And really that strategy starts with you. And it really involves a very introspective look at who you are and what you ultimately want. What is your long-term goals? What are your financial capabilities? What is it that is causing you to make a change right now? So for instance, is it because you want to have more time with your family, or you want to get off the road. Maybe you're a travel person and you need to be spending more time at home, or you're just tired of the industry you're in. I know a lot of people that are just plain tired of corporate America, and they really want that American dream of owning their own business. All of those are great reasons, but we want to make sure that the reasons that you are contemplating buying a franchise fit with the type of business you end up purchasing. Don't compromise. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that piece at the end, but when you get to the point where you're going to make a decision, don't just make a decision because you're excited about the idea of owning a franchise. Make the decision because it's a good one and it's a perfect fit for you. So in the first step, we want to do a self-evaluation. I mentioned earlier determining what your motivations are. Again, what are your financial goals? Is this franchise going to be something that is going to put your kids through school? What is the real, true reason that you want to get into franchising? Do you want to, how do you want your life to be different? What is it about a day in the life of this new franchisee, that will be different than it is today? And how is it going to be different? The other question I would ask yourself is, why now? Is it because you had a bad day with your boss? I hear that a lot, actually, where people will say, I'm requesting information on this particular franchise, and when I start really digging into what their motivations are, they tell me that it's really because they're having a really bad day with their boss. And that's not always a really good reason to buy into a business, because you aren't in the right mindset typically. It could be if it is well thought through. Sharon? So step 2 is to determine your financial parameters. Are you capable of making $1 million investment in a food franchise? Are you looking at an investment of more like $10,000? Those kinds of questions, when you ask yourself, how much is realistic for me to invest, is a really important step in narrowing down the type of business that you're going to buy into. Will you have investors? What role will they play? We've got situations where you might be looking at a franchise opportunity that requires a net worth of $500,000. That's pretty typical. And if you don't have that kind of financial capability, it doesn't have to be liquid. It's just a net worth. And if you don't qualify for that, you might need to have your brother-in-law, your parent, whoever it is, become a partner with you so that you actually meet those qualifications. Keep in mind that when you're going through the franchise discovery process, they're going to be looking at you just like you're looking at them. So this isn't necessarily like going out and buying a car. You can't just look at a business and say, yep, that's the one I want, and write a check. They're going to be looking at whether or not you have the background and the financial ability to be successful, because again, if you're not successful, then it's going to weaken their brand as well. Going back to your financial ability, how much can you borrow? This is a pretty critical note right now. Banks, everybody's aware of what our economy is, and the banks themselves are not borrowing to potential franchisees. It has been a very, very significant hindrance to the growth of the franchise industry in the last probably 3 years, significantly more so in the last year. I think that we are starting to see, especially as an industry, that the banks will start to address some of those issues and make those free up the money soon. We're starting to see it happen in smaller banks and smaller communities, but right now you need to be very comfortable knowing that if you go into this, you may have some challenges getting bank financing. There might be some other sources that you'll look at, and your franchisor would probably be able to help you with that. Also, you're going to need to understand how much income and how soon it is that you need to be making income. So for instance, if you're going to buy into a franchise and typically their break-even point is 1 year, can you sustain your own lifestyle that long without having a paycheck? It's as simple as that. And if the answer is no, then don't put yourself through the stress of trying to get to that point of break even, and what happens if you don't, kind of thing. So we want to make sure that you're comfortable with those key steps. Okay, step 3. Determining your optimal timing. Okay, so again, this is looking at internally. What are you going to choose, and when are you going to choose it? When are you going to make that decision? How soon do you want to be in business? Maybe you are getting to the point where you are vesting your stock options at work, and you want to make sure that those stocks have vested completely before you leave, otherwise you lose them. If they vest on December 31st, 2011, you probably aren't in a position at this very moment to start looking at a franchise because you're not in a position to make your decision. The franchisor is going to start working with you probably 3 months in advance of you making your decision. I'm not saying that you can't go out and kick a few tires. I'm just saying that if you know up front that you're not going to make a decision until next January, it might be more productive to wait a year to start your franchise discovery process, because if you have a specific location in mind, so for instance, if you want to be 10 miles from home, that location might not be available a year from now with the franchise that you select. So you want to make sure that your timing is appropriate. And you might want to communicate that timing to the franchisor as you're looking at those opportunities. Is your timing flexible? Can you start, let's say you're going to make a decision in the next 3 months. Well, that's great. Are you 3 months from now going on a vacation? Is your oldest child graduating from college? You want to make sure that you have the ability and the flexibility to open a location on a schedule that the franchisor is developing for you. In addition to that, you might even be concerned about how quickly they can find a location for you. So keeping in mind that if your plan is to be open in 3 months, they might not find a location for 6 months. So again, keeping in mind all of those aspects of discovering what type of franchise you want, and also how quickly you want to be in business. Step 4. Determine your ideal business characteristics. This is one area that I think could potentially be the most critical piece of the success of whether or not you're in business 5 years from now. This is also the area I think most people forget. I kind of talked about whether or not, in the beginning, what type of business you wanted, and a lot of people select businesses based on the place they like to eat, instead of looking at what type of business they really want to own and in what sector. In franchising, there literally are I think it's 5,500 different sectors, not businesses, but sectors. So we're talking about everything from childcare and education to business. There's home-based franchises, there's retail locations. You can't really name a sector, I don't think, that isn't franchised. Oh yes, I can. One, funeral homes. I haven't found a funeral home yet. But typically, most types of business sectors are franchised. So what is it? Have you always said, gosh, if I could own my own business, it would be X. Maybe it's a nail salon. Maybe it's a floor covering service. Whatever that business is, keep that in mind. Also, again, look at your surrounding area. Do you want the business to be located 5 miles, 2 miles, 2 blocks, whatever your requirements are? And this is important because you need to be able to support that business as intently as you would anything else in your life. You need to be able to get there quickly and often. So if you open a business and it's 50 to 100 miles from your home, it's going to make a big difference over time in your ability to support and grow that business. What hours do you prefer to work? Well, here's another piece. I spoke about the gentleman from Subway, and he was, this was the problem with him. He did not want to work the hours that that business was open. I talked to a woman one time on the airplane. She was telling me, she was asking me about franchise consulting and was telling me the issues that she was having with her coffee shop. She bought into a franchise coffee house, and I won't tell you which brand it is, but I'm sure you would recognize it. And after 3 months, she loved it. She was doing really, really well. After a year, her sales started to fall off, and the franchisor obviously was very concerned, kept coming back to her and asking her what the issue was, and she kept blaming it on everything else. She blamed it on the marketing, she blamed it on the operation, she blamed it on her employees. But during the course of this conversation on an airplane, I asked her a few questions, and in the process she told me that she's not a morning person. So she actually was going into her coffee shop around noon. So when I explained to her that the bulk of her business was being done when she was not there, is going to have a significant impact on the ability of growing that business and being as successful as possible. So making sure that you understand what those hours are and how you, what your best time of the day is, are you willing to work weekends? That kind of thing it plays a big role in it. What do you like to do at work? Are you good with a lot of paper? Are you not so good with a lot of paper? Do you like to work online? Are you organized? Are you, what frustrates you? What do you dislike? All of those are really important for you to sit down and make a list. Make a laundry list of everything that has ever bothered you about your current position and past positions. And you will start to see some trends emerge. The positions that you really liked probably are a reflection of the things that you enjoy doing, and the positions that you really did not like are probably a reflection of the things that frustrate you. Maybe you really liked a specific position because you didn't really have to deal with any other employees. Well, that's critical if you're going to have a franchise. If you, conversely, you might realize that on another position you had an entire team of people reporting to you, and you found that the management of those people was very frustrating and time-consuming. Well, that's a key piece in evaluating a franchise, because you need to know if you want a franchise that you're going to be basically owner-operator and you don't have to worry about a lot of staff, or you are willing to have a business that has a number of employees and you are managing them and dealing with all of their lives and all of the things that are going on in their world. So those are some of the things that you should absolutely keep track of. Again, not only what frustrates you, but what are your skills? Are you good at sales? Do you enjoy doing selling? Some people are really natural salespeople. But if they're not, don't buy into a franchise where the franchisee role is contingent on building the business based on their sales skills. I have seen that one particular instance over and over and over, where people that really, they've said to me, you know, I'm thinking about buying this franchise. Well, that franchise requires sales skills, and you have never sold anything, or they flat out tell me they don't like to be in a position where they're trying to sell somebody. So that's a key piece to keep in mind. What are your weaknesses? If there's a issue with temper, that was another one. You know, somebody that has their temper was based on the expectation of their employees, well, that person probably should not have employees, flat out. And if they do, they need to be very few and very highly skilled. So those are some of the key, those are additional characteristics to keep in mind. Employees, we kind of just talked about, you know, how many do you want, what kind do you want. And I think it's important to keep in mind that if you get into any kind of a business that requires scheduling, so you've got employees that come in at and they are operating a pizza place. The pizza place is open from 8 o'clock in the morning, or excuse me, 10:30 in the morning, and they're open until midnight. You are going to have multiple shifts. In addition to that, the employees that are working there are going to be less than skilled. They're unskilled labor, and that means that when they don't show up for work, you will be making the pizza. Is that something that you want to do? Are you willing to work with these people? Are you willing to work long hours, and are you willing to have a lot of turnover? Because a lot of your time as a franchisee will be spent recruiting new staff. How many employees? You know, what do you want to do in terms of the number of employees you have? Maybe it is a better option to look at a franchise that allows you to work from home, and you have employees that are highly skilled, and you pay them a salary, and they're probably going to stay around for a long time. That's great. But also, here's another piece. Let's say you're going to buy into a hair salon. Gray Clips had a great program for recruiting stylists, but in the mid-90s, a lot of the cosmetology schools closed, and franchisees were left trying to find stylists, and they were just plain not available. So making sure when you're evaluating a franchise that you have the inventory, if you will, of qualified and licensed professionals available to support your system or your location is going to be another key question that you want to make sure that you address. Okay. How do you feel about risk? This is a great example. When my husband and I bought our house, the night before we closed, the day before we closed, we went to the bank and we got our down payment. I think at the time it was about $25,000, which, you know, when you're young and first married, that's a lot of money. But we had that check in our hands, and we went to our closing the next day. The night before, I slept fine. I absolutely slept fine. My husband did not sleep at all. He is very risk adverse. So based on that, he would have a very difficult time buying into a franchise, because you are basically giving up control of your business because somebody else is telling you what to do. On the flip side, you also have, and I know this is confusing, but this is why the question is here, you also have to understand that by buying a franchise, you have the ability to reduce your risk because they've already proven their system. So really understanding it and making sure that you are comfortable making the investment. Maybe you're not comfortable making the investment at all, and you just need to really go buy or go find another job. It's really a matter of taking a serious look at yourself and your spouse. All of these questions really need to be a conversation that you have not only with you internally, but your spouse as well. Even if your spouse is not involved in the business, on some level, if you're married long enough, you know they're going to be involved. So you want to make sure that you've kind of gotten a temperature reading on a lot of these questions and make sure that they're comfortable with the decisions you're making. Status. How important is status? You know, I think that this is another area that I know, and I don't mean to generalize, but I know men do not have near the concern about status as women do. Here's an example. A colleague of mine came to me, told me he wanted to buy a franchise for his wife. And he was so excited because he had gone and done all of his due diligence. He found the perfect business, but he wanted to run it by me before he presented it to Betsy. So we sit down and he starts telling me about this business. When he got to the end, I said, okay, what is the business? And he said, well, it's Swisher International. And Swisher International, for those of you that may not recognize the name, is the company that cleans public toilets and restrooms. And just as a case in fact, they are completely sold out in the United States. They have an amazing earnings claim where their franchisees are extremely successful. But when he told me what it was, I laughed and I said, there's no way Betsy's going to do that. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, and I know Betsy quite well, she is a woman that likes to lunch. She enjoys being home with her kids, and she plays tennis and has her nails done. And the idea of her telling her neighbors and her friends and tennis partners that she owns a public restroom cleaning business is probably not going to go over well. You know, it might be making a ton of money and everything else, but there's a certain thing that goes along with feeling good about the business that you are owning. She ended up buying a franchise, and the franchise she bought is actually a nonprofit franchise that provides goods and services to cancer patients. That is a much different type of franchise opportunity, and it is not because she wanted to make a lot of money. Her motivation was because she wanted something to do that would give back to the community. So again, going back to those motivations, obviously that plays a role in it. And she wanted to have something that she felt good talking about to other people, which is the status piece. Franchising can limit the services and products your business can offer to the public. So if you are thinking that you're going to own a Mexican restaurant and you're going to sell your brother's taco recipe, it's not going to happen. They have complete and utter control over all of the products and services that are offered in that restaurant. So that is going to be a big piece when you start looking at buying into a franchise, is whether or not you can follow what the current process and procedures are. On the same order, you know, can you follow a system? Are you willing to basically take a proven process, and are you comfortable implementing that process? Not trying to improve it, but just implementing it as it is. Certainly franchisees are a great source of improving and strengthening a franchise system, but the franchisee is not typically going to make sweeping changes to anybody's system. And so going into a franchise with the right expectations is going to be a lot better for both you and the franchisor if you know that you are willing and able to follow what they've already put in place. Step 5. This is our last step. Write it down. It always makes sense to, when you're doing this type of an evaluation, is to write everything down and then start to prioritize. When you prioritize, you will start to see the type of business that you want, or at least the characteristics of those business emerge. So I'm going to give you an example. If I was going to find a business for my brother-in-law, which is actually something I did, he wanted a business that was located 15 miles or less from his home. He had a comfort level of $500,000 or $500,000 total investment, and at least he was willing to do $50,000 liquid. He wanted a company or a franchise that allowed him to break even in 6 months or less. He did not want retail, but he does like to provide service. He didn't want to have a product. He wanted something that was service-oriented. He does have really good, very strong sales skills. He doesn't realize he does, but he does. And so when I started to ask him questions about what type of business or what he did for a living, although he was involved in computer technology, he really liked the fact that he was able to work directly with clients and be able to upgrade their systems for additional types of services that they hadn't thought of or didn't know they offered in his current position. He also recognized that he's not really great with a lot of employees. He knew that he liked working with other people, but he didn't want to have a lot of unskilled, high turnover type of employment relationships. He also wanted to have a business that he might start from home, and as it grew, he could then put an office in place. Ultimately, I recommended that he look at some residential service type of businesses. He ended up buying a franchise that is a restoration. So he now sells restoration services that are to homeowners. His referral base is the insurance company and insurance agents, insurance agents. He's built a great network with them, and anytime somebody has fire or mold or any kind of damage to their home, flood, they call him. His franchisees come in, or his workers come in and clean up the basement or whatever the issue is. So he's not actually doing the business. He's not out there getting his hands dirty. His job is really selling the opportunity to and making those arrangements and networking with insurance agents and homeowners and groups of people that refer business back to him. So you want to do the same thing as you're starting to look at all of these questions. Create a model of the type of business you're really looking for, and then keep it handy. Put it aside. Use it as a guide for how you're going to look at different businesses. Which businesses are going to be a good fit for you. So you're going to use your guide and you're going to say, okay, so you're on Franchise Solutions and you've got a ton, literally hundreds of different opportunities, and you're going to be able to say, okay, this one looks great, but you know what? You look at your model, it doesn't work. So you want to review your opportunities and compare it against your model. It's really going to help you narrow things down. And my recommendation is to create a short list. I would spend a ton of time up front at just looking at the characteristics of the different types of businesses. And you can request information from a company, but keep in mind that once you request information, you're going to have people calling you nonstop. So that's not fair. They're not going to call you nonstop, but they are going to have you in their database, and they're going to send you information. Once you've gotten that information, you need to be able to narrow down those possibilities and be able to communicate back to that franchise salesperson to say, yep, this one I'm looking at looks really good. You're meeting all of the needs in my model. I want to move forward in the discovery process. Or if not, don't just not respond. You need to let them know so that they're not spinning wheels and wasting time with you when they could be talking to somebody else that does have an interest. So be careful about making sure that you're communicating with that franchise person, that franchise salesperson, so that they're not wasting time, both yours and theirs. All right. Once you've gotten your model pretty good and you've narrowed down your list, now you want to look at the type of business it is and what they have accomplished. I like to tell people, if you have never been in franchising and never purchased a franchise before, don't be a pioneer. And what I mean by that is, if somebody has less than 10 units, it is clear that they are still growing their system and modifying the operating system, which means that with 10 units, they're probably doing pretty well and they are having success. However, they may also continue to adjust their model and adjust their system, and what it is today may not be what it is 10 years from now. So when you look at a brand, I would say you want to look at how established they are, how well recognized they are. Now, I'm going to qualify that by saying that doesn't automatically mean that the larger the better. If you get into Burger King or McDonald's or Subway, some of those are overwhelming because they are so big that you kind of lose the ability of being part of a franchise and a franchise family. You get caught up in a lot more politics. I think that being part of an organization that is probably 50 units or more is where a new franchisee will probably thrive. From 50 to 2,000, 3,000, even 5,000 units, I think is a great place, because you know that they've proven their system, they have a track record, and they have really ironed out exactly how they're going to support you. That's another piece. If you are going into a franchise, you buy a franchise and they don't have a location in your area, then as I mentioned before, you're buying you're buying their brand and you're buying the support. Well, they don't have the support in your area and they don't have brand recognition. You're really only buying their system, and is that enough? And are you getting enough value out of that? So keep those things in mind. If you are looking at a franchise and they say that they will provide those support and they will do extra advertising, get it in writing. Make it part of your franchise agreement, and if not, it's going to be difficult to prove that. Discovery steps. So once you actually request information from a franchisor, they are going to take you through a series of discovery steps. The first step is they're going to ask you for financial information, and what they're doing here is really getting a sense that you have the financial wherewithal to be able to buy into their franchise and sustain their growth until you break even. And once you have proven your ability or your financial capability, then the next step is really going into an intensive deep dive of the franchise opportunity. They will, at some point in the discovery process, they will disclose you, and it's called a franchise disclosure document, or you may hear the term UFOC, Uniform Franchise Offering. If you once you receive this document, you will have the ability to really understand all of the information associated with this company. It will give you everything from the business experience of the leadership to any bankruptcies, any what the franchisee is required, what the obligations of the franchisor are. It will even give you a financial performance representation if they have one. Most franchisees, or franchisors, excuse me, I will say about half have them. I think more and more they are getting them, but it's a great way to understand what the financials are of a franchise. The final step, or at least somewhere in the process, you want to make a trip to the home office. You want to see everybody that's going to be supporting you. You want to meet with operations and marketing and real estate. You want to have a really good, complete understanding of the business. How are they going to support you, and what are they going to do to make you successful? Next. And finally, you just want to make sure that when you get down to making a decision, is that franchise going to help you achieve the goals that you want for your lifestyle and your financial expectations? If it doesn't, walk away. Don't compromise, because it will always come back to you. If you feel comfortable making a compromise, make sure that it isn't an overwhelming compromise for both you and your spouse or anybody else, your partner, etc., that are involved in business, unless you feel very, very secure with it. But in the long run, make sure that your decision is the right decision.
We had, Kim, thank you so much. That was awesome. I really enjoyed it, and I know our listeners did also. We have just time for one question, although we had quite a few, but I thought this one might be a good one for you to answer, and that is, how do you know the company is reputable? I mean, how would I figure that out?
Well, first of all, we are living in the internet age, and it's pretty easy to Google a franchise company and any of the leadership team that is involved with the company, and you get a pretty good handful of articles that are going to be either really, really good, or they may have some negative connotations. I would be careful about the negative connotations, because some of them may not be warranted. I'm sure everybody has heard of franchise webs, or heard of websites that are, I think there's one called Walmart Sucks. Well, there's a number of websites that franchise owners have set up that are typical, or similar to that type of an arrangement, and they may not be very flattering. I would address it with the franchise organization and find out, what they have to say about it. I would also suggest that if they don't tell you about it in advance, it might be a red flag. But that's one way. The other way is, as I mentioned with the FDD, your franchise disclosure document, you will have the ability to read through this document, and it will give you any litigation that's been going on with that organization. If you have 3 to 5 pages of litigation, one after another, where franchisees are not happy, or they're suing the franchisor for breach or fraud or some other thing, all of those are required by federal law to be disclosed in that document. So please pay attention to that. It's going to give you a very good picture of the type of relationship the franchisor has with his franchisees. Excuse me. The third way is to call the franchisee. Ask them if they would do it again. Ask them what their experience has been, and get them to provide information on what the franchisee or franchisor does to support them.
Well, one of the questions that was asked also kind of ties in with your answer, Kim, and that is, on the FDD, are all the franchisees listed?
Yes, they are. Every single franchisee is listed whether they are in business or not. That's another key piece, Sharon, is that not only are all the franchisees listed, but you will also see what the level of growth is. So anybody that has opened a location or closed a location is also disclosed. So you can see if, if the franchise salesperson said that they've added 150 units last year, that's awesome, wonderful growth. But then you get to the FDD and you see that they closed 200. That makes me, that gives you a red flag. You want to make sure that you discuss that. And part of that is not only discussing it with the franchisor, but it's also using that list of franchisees and calling them up, because all of those people are listed in there, and I would ask them very specific and pointed questions about why they decided to close their location. Was there anything that the franchisor could have done to support them better, et cetera, et cetera.
At what point in the process do you usually get the FDD, Kim?
I generally coach franchisors to provide that disclosure document sooner in the process than later. If it is provided later in the process, I feel like there's a reason that they haven't given it to you sooner. They should provide it. I typically tell people to provide it to the candidate right after they have provided their financials. So if you want that document, you typically have to provide financial information just so that the franchisor is comfortable that they're not being shopped by a competitor, or that they aren't dealing with somebody that's really not that interested. It's a fair amount of expense to send those documents out. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us today, all
You
of
bet.
the attendees, and I thank you, Kim, for stepping in and give our best wishes to Michael. And I also want to again thank our sponsor, Blimpie, for sponsoring this webinar. And if you're interested in Blimpie, you can find them at their website, and we would love to have you back onto Franchise Solutions. Again, thank you, Kim, and thank you, everyone, for attending.
Hey, Sharon, one quick last thing. For those of you that are interested, we have an article that we just published on the Franchise Solutions website on how to evaluate an FDD. So you might want to take a look at that. I think that they will include the link to it in your reply email, something like that I think we talked about. But it's a great article that allows you to really understand how to look at an FDD. Good luck to everyone.
I think on Michael's website, don't you have some sort of a workbook too that
yes, we do.
Interested in also? Yep.
Yep.
So that's at Michael's side.
MSAworldwide.com.
Okay.
We will have a new website in a week or so.
All right. Well, again, thank you, everyone.
You bet.
Good luck to everyone. Okay.
Great.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.